A whispered wish can change the course of a life, even when no one is watching. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. Now back to my. The rain had left the streets of Seoul glistening under the muted glow of the streetlights, puddles reflecting neon signs like fractured mirrors. Inside the towering glass and steel complex, Jin-Woo Kim walked through a corridor lined with polished marble, his polished black shoes tapping a steady rhythm that echoed faintly against the high ceilings. He was a figure of silent authority, his tailored suit impeccable, yet his eyes were sharp, restless, always scanning. In the corner of the visiting room, the prisoner sat, head bowed, hands folded on the small table before him, his voice almost a whisper as he spoke the words that no one else seemed to hear. Mai, carrying a tray of tea, paused mid-step, her dark eyes narrowing as she caught the trembling undertone of his voice. The room was filled with murmurs and soft laughter from other staff and minor visitors who hadn't noticed the moment, but Mai's gaze was fixed, steady, and attentive. She set down the tray with the precise care of someone who understood the weight of silence, her fingers brushing the porcelain in a deliberate, almost reverent motion. The air felt heavier as she leaned slightly closer, not intrusive, merely present, and in that stillness, the prisoner's words found her. It was not a loud declaration, not a dramatic appeal, just a simple, fragile wish carried on the edge of vulnerability, yet it struck with the force of quiet gravity. Jin-Woo, observing from a short distance, noticed the shift in the room's subtle energy, the way her shoulders straightened imperceptibly, the way her eyes reflected a resolve he had not anticipated. The other staff laughed again at a clumsy joke, and the prisoner's eyes flicked toward the corner, sensing the solitary attention of someone who mattered. Mai's lips pressed together in silence, and for a heartbeat, the world outside seemed to pause. The soft hum of fluorescent lights, the distant wail of a siren, even the faint drip of water from a leaky pipe, all of it receding to the periphery. She nodded imperceptibly to herself, a silent acknowledgement that she had heard, that she understood. Jin-Woo's gaze lingered, an unfamiliar awareness stirring in his chest, a quiet admiration for the poise and discretion she carried like armor. The prisoner's voice faded into a whispered sigh, the room filling again with the low murmur of inconsequential chatter, but the seed had been planted, invisible yet undeniable. Mai straightened, adjusted the edge of her uniform, and moved on with her task. The tea tray now balanced perfectly, each step measured, her presence a quiet testimony to attention and care. Jin-Woo continued his observation, noting the subtle power in her restraint, the way she had claimed responsibility without a word, an elegance in the simplicity of listening and choosing to act. Outside, the city lights shimmered against wet asphalt, indifferent to the gravity unfolding within those walls. Yet within the quiet corners of that room, the first tremors of change were already in motion. The prisoner's final wish lingered in the air like a soft echo, unseen by most, but in Mai's unwavering attention, it had found a guardian, and in that moment, the rules of expectation and hierarchy seemed to bend, if only slightly, before the resolute spirit of someone who refused to overlook the quiet dignity of a single, fragile request. The hallway beyond the visiting room seemed to stretch endlessly, the polished floors reflecting the faint amber light from overhead sconces, and every echo of footsteps sounded amplified in the stillness. Mai carried her tray of tea with careful precision, each cup and saucer balanced with the subtle grace of someone who understood that even the smallest gesture could convey respect and attention. She moved past the indifferent chatter of staff and visitors, their voices blending into a low hum, unaware of the silent promise she had just made. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, the streets slick and shimmering, while inside, the air held the faint scent of polished wood and brewed tea. Jin-Woo Kim followed from a distance, his presence imposing yet restrained, observing the way Mai navigated the space with calm authority. There was a rhythm to her movements, measured and intentional, as if each step and placement of her hands was part of a larger, unspoken understanding. He noticed how she occasionally glanced back at the visiting room, her eyes flickering momentarily with thoughtfulness before returning to her tasks, carrying a sense of purpose that could not be ignored. Other staff whispered and exchanged looks, some rolling their eyes, others smirking at what they assumed was the trivial diligence of a maid, yet none noticed the weight of the attention she held in her quiet, unassuming way. I paused briefly near a large window overlooking the city, the muted glow of neon and streetlights casting reflections on her face, highlighting the focus in her eyes. Jinwoo's gaze lingered on her, a faint tension in his shoulders as he began to feel the subtle shift of authority not in titles or wealth, but in the careful execution of responsibility and empathy. The prisoner's wish, though a small and private matter, had become a thread connecting them, weaving through the room and into the space beyond, leaving an invisible but palpable influence on the atmosphere. I continued her rounds, checking that each detail was attended to, adjusting napkins, straightening teacups, all the while moving with the kind of grace that made it impossible to disregard her presence, even as others tried to. The staff's laughter and casual remarks bounced harmlessly off the walls, unable to penetrate the quiet determination she carried. Jinwoo observed the subtle changes in her demeanor, the way she interacted with the environment, sensing an intelligence and resolve that had previously gone unnoticed. Every gesture of hers was deliberate, and yet unspoken, creating an almost imperceptible dialogue with the world around her, one that spoke of loyalty, courage, and the commitment to fulfill a promise against the weight of expectation and risk. The room seemed to contract and expand with each movement, time stretching in the attention to detail and care she exhibited. Jinwoo felt a faint stirring within himself, a recognition that influence did not always come from commands or power, but from integrity, persistence, and the courage to honor the wishes of another, however small they seemed to the casual observer. As Mai moved toward the service area, she cast one last glance toward the empty visiting room, the faint outline of the prisoner still lingering in her mind, the echo of his final words resonating in her thoughts. Jinwoo followed silently, a quiet acknowledgement passing between them, unspoken yet undeniable, the beginning of a connection that would challenge assumptions, reveal character, and quietly rewrite the measure of respect in a world often ruled by appearances. The city beyond continued its indifferent hum, unaware of the quiet decisions unfolding within. Yet within the walls of the complex, the first movements toward change had already begun, carried by the steady, attentive hands of Mai, whose resolve was now a silent force no one could dismiss. The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, scattering soft patterns across the polished marble floors, and the muted sounds of the city outside created a quiet rhythm that filled the halls of Jinwoo Kim's towering complex. Mai moved with deliberate calm, each step measured and purposeful, her hands steady as she adjusted the placement of teacups on a low service table, the porcelain catching the light and gleaming with subtle precision. There was a sense of weightless tension in her movements, the kind that comes from knowing that every small act carries significance beyond the immediate moment. Jinwoo walked a few paces behind, his tailored suit immaculate, his gaze following her with a quiet, assessing curiosity, noting the controlled composure in her posture and the careful deliberation of her gestures. The other staff passed by, whispering among themselves, their voices light and unconcerned, oblivious to the undercurrent of focus that connected Mai to the memory of the prisoner's whispered wish. She paused briefly by a narrow corridor lined with framed photographs of cityscapes and abstract art, her dark eyes scanning the images almost absent-mindedly, yet the subtle tilt of her head betrayed the thoughtfulness with which she carried the prisoner's words. The soft hum of the air conditioning mingled with the distant echo of footsteps, creating an almost cinematic backdrop, as if the walls themselves were aware of the quiet determination that pulsed through the space. Jinwa's awareness of her presence grew with each passing moment, the initial curiosity transforming into something more contemplative, a recognition that influence and power could reside in silent vigilance as much as in spoken authority. I moved on to arrange a set of documents on a nearby desk, her fingers brushing lightly over the leather-bound folders, and in the brief pause before she straightened, there was a deliberate inhale, a moment of internal alignment that seemed to anchor her in the weight of responsibility she had silently assumed. Outside, the city streets shimmered with the residue of recent rainfall, neon reflections glancing off wet asphalt, a faint mist hovering in the air. Yet within the building, the atmosphere was taut with subtle energy, a quiet electricity born from unspoken commitment. Jinwoo adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, his eyes narrowing slightly as he observed the way Mai navigated the environment with a composure that belied the apparent simplicity of her tasks. Her every movement seemed purposeful, yet effortless, a choreography of attentiveness that made it clear she carried more than the visible duties of her role. She bore the responsibility of honoring the whispered trust placed upon her, and even in the absence of recognition, she moved as though the integrity of the act itself was reward enough. The corridor seemed to stretch ahead endlessly, the reflective surfaces amplifying each tiny motion, each subtle glance, creating a landscape where the quiet exchange between observer and observed was palpable. Jinwoo felt a rare pause in his usual certainty, a recognition that authority could take forms that did not command or demand, but rather earned respect through observation and restraint. Mai's eyes flickered momentarily toward the distant visiting room, the echo of the prisoner's soft voice still residing in her thoughts, and a subtle shift passed over her expression, a silent reaffirmation of commitment, before she turned her attention back to the immediate tasks, her movements resuming with unwavering precision. The soft light of the afternoon cast long shadows across the floors, and in those shadows, the delicate balance of observation, duty, and unspoken promise played out, quietly shaping the contours of respect and anticipation that would guide the moments to come, leaving Jinwoo quietly aware that the smallest acts of care often carried the most profound weight. The afternoon sunlight began to fade, casting a softer, golden hue across the polished marble floors of the complex, while the subtle hum of the air circulation mingled with distant city noises to create a quiet, contemplative atmosphere. Mai moved with measured care, her hands adjusting the placement of documents and teacups with a precision that suggested both attention to detail and a deeper purpose beyond the visible tasks. Each step she took was deliberate, her dark eyes reflecting a calm determination that seemed to hold the space around her in a gentle balance. Jinwoo Kim followed at a discreet distance, his gaze tracing her movements, noting the way she carried herself with an unspoken authority that contrasted with the casual demeanor of the other staff moving past them. The whispers of the staff and the occasional laughter bounced lightly off the walls, but they did not penetrate the focused energy surrounding Mai, who navigated the environment with the quiet confidence of someone fully aware of her responsibilities. She paused momentarily near a window, the golden light illuminating the contours of her face, highlighting the intensity in her expression as she reflected on the prisoner's whispered wish. The thought of fulfilling this small, significant act weighed upon her with a gravity that was both personal and profound, and her posture suggested the weight of responsibility she had chosen to carry silently. Jinwoo observed the subtle shift in her demeanor, the way her shoulders squared, the way her hands moved with careful deliberation, and he began to sense the quiet power inherent in steadfast attention to duty and moral resolve. As Mai resumed her tasks, the soft clinking of porcelain and the gentle sliding of papers across polished wood filled the air, creating a rhythm that was at once ordinary and imbued with quiet significance. The prisoner's wish lingered in the recesses of her mind, an invisible thread connecting past to present, shaping her movements and decisions in subtle ways that were invisible to casual observers, but deeply meaningful to those attuned to the nuances of human character. Jinwoo's thoughts followed her silently, the usual certainty of his authority giving way to a reflective awareness that sometimes influence and respect were earned not through dominance, but through integrity, attentiveness, and quiet courage. The long corridor stretched ahead, reflecting light from the tall windows and amplifying the sense of anticipation in the space. While outside, the city continued its muted activity, oblivious to the careful choreography unfolding within. Maya's gaze flickered briefly to the distant visiting room, the memory of the prisoner's soft, earnest voice still resonating in her consciousness, and a subtle, almost imperceptible tightening of her lips marked a reaffirmation of the silent commitment she had taken on. Each movement from that point onward carried an added weight, a layering of purpose and mindfulness that transformed ordinary tasks into acts of deliberate care and respect. Jinwoo continued to watch, his expression unreadable, yet his mind increasingly engaged by the demonstration of character and fortitude before him. Recognizing that the quiet fulfillment of promises, even the smallest, could reshape perceptions and command a form of respect that louder, more visible displays might never achieve. The light shifted, slowly with the setting sun, shadows elongating and mingling with the ambient glow, framing Maya's purposeful movements in a tableau that was at once ordinary and remarkable, a testament to the power of attentive action and the silent assertion of dignity in a world often defined by appearances alone. The late afternoon sunlight had softened into a warm amber glow, filtering through the large windows and casting gentle reflections on the polished marble floors of Jinwoo Kim's office complex. Mai moved with a quiet determination, her hands adjusting the arrangement of papers, teacups, and small decorative objects on the service tables, each gesture deliberate, precise, and full of silent intention. The soft clicking of porcelain and the sliding of leather-bound folders created a gentle rhythm, harmonizing with the distant hum of the city outside, the muffled sound of traffic and pedestrians providing a subtle backdrop to the careful choreography unfolding within. As she worked, her mind remained anchored to the prisoner's whispered wish, replaying the words in her thoughts, weighing their meaning, and mapping the steps she would need to take to honor the promise without drawing attention to herself. Jinwoo followed quietly, his sharp gaze tracing her movements, noting the grace and focus with which she performed every task, a form of quiet authority that contrasted with the casual indifference of the other staff moving through the corridors. The whispers and soft laughter of others bounced lightly against the walls, yet they were incapable of disturbing the composed energy that seemed to radiate from Mai, her presence commanding subtle respect without a word or overt gesture. She paused briefly at a desk, lightly brushing her fingers over the edge of a leather-bound document, her eyes reflecting the depth of her contemplation, the faintest crease of thought passing over her brow as she considered the careful sequence of actions needed to fulfill the prisoner's request. Jinwoo watched, sensing a rare combination of attentiveness and resolve that spoke louder than instructions or orders ever could, recognizing that her strength lay not in visibility, but in the careful, deliberate fulfillment of duty and moral responsibility. As Mai moved toward the end of the corridor, the golden light of the setting sun accentuated her form, the shadows stretching behind her, creating a tableau in which every small motion held significance beyond the immediate moment. The city outside continued its quiet, bustling routine, unaware of the subtle but profound choices being made within the building, choices that would ripple through the lives of those involved in ways invisible to the casual observer. Maya's eyes flickered briefly toward the distant visiting room, the echo of the prisoner's soft voice lingering in her thoughts, a gentle reminder of the silent obligation she had assumed. Her movements resumed with precise care, each adjustment of a cup, each placement of a paper, reinforcing the invisible thread of responsibility she carried. Jinwoo's observation deepened into reflection, his usual certainty tempered by recognition of the quiet power that could emerge from integrity, patience, and the careful attention to small but meaningful acts. The corridor seemed to elongate with each step, the polished surfaces reflecting light and movement, framing the subtle narrative of intention and care unfolding before him. Every small gesture, every thoughtful pause, became part of a larger pattern, a testament to the quiet dignity of fulfilling a promise and the weight of respect earned not through authority or display, but through careful, deliberate, and morally guided action. The atmosphere of the complex, filled with muted light and soft echoes, held a quiet anticipation, a sense that the unfolding commitment of Mai, observed with growing awareness by Jin Woo, was slowly reshaping the perception of responsibility and respect within the walls, and that the true measure of influence often lay in the silent, steadfast dedication to honor what was entrusted, however unseen it might be by the world outside. The evening light had shifted into a soft, muted glow, filtering through the expansive windows and casting elongated reflections across the marble floors of Jinwoo Kim's office complex. Mai moved with a quiet, deliberate rhythm, her dark eyes scanning the room with careful attention, ensuring every item on the service tables was perfectly aligned, each adjustment made with the precision of someone who understood that even the smallest detail could carry weight beyond its appearance. The distant hum of the city provided a constant, gentle backdrop, the occasional passing car and muted pedestrian noise blending seamlessly with the subtle creaks and clicks of her movements, creating a quiet symphony of attentiveness. Jinwoo walked behind her, his tailored suit maintaining its sharp lines despite the hours spent on his feet, his gaze lingering on the way she handled each object with deliberate care, noting the unwavering focus and the sense of moral purpose that seemed to imbue her every motion. The staff moved past them, whispering lightly and exchanging casual smiles, oblivious to the invisible thread of responsibility and commitment connecting Mai to the prisoner's whispered wish. And yet, in the midst of this ordinary activity, the air around her seemed charged with an understated gravity. Mai paused briefly near a low bookshelf, her hand lightly grazing the spines of carefully arranged books, a thoughtful crease forming across her forehead as she contemplated the steps needed to honor the silent trust placed in her. Jinwoo's observation deepened, his eyes following the subtle movements of her shoulders, the tilt of her head, the measured cadence of her steps, and he felt a rare recognition of the quiet authority she wielded, not through words or overt commands, but through steadfast attention, integrity, and the courage to act when discretion was required. The corridor stretched ahead, light from the fading sun casting long shadows that danced across the polished floors, accentuating the deliberate motions of Mai as she moved, the space itself seeming to respond to her presence with a measured calm. Each gesture, each careful placement of a document or teacup carried a resonance that extended beyond the immediate environment, a testament to the invisible impact of thoughtful action performed with purpose and care. Jinwoo sensed a subtle shift within himself, a reflection on the nature of respect and influence, realizing that it could be earned in silence, through the conscientious fulfillment of obligations and the quiet courage to prioritize integrity over recognition. Mai's gaze drifted momentarily toward the distant visiting room, the faint echo of the prisoner's soft voice lingering in her mind, a reminder of the promise she had taken to heart, and she inhaled deeply, centering herself before returning to her tasks with renewed determination. The golden glow of the setting sun highlighted the contours of her movements, creating a cinematic tableau in which every action was charged with significance, yet performed with an elegance and restraint that made the effort seem effortless. The quiet rhythm of her steps, the gentle clink of porcelain, and the subtle arrangement of objects on the tables all coalesced into a delicate harmony, reflecting the steadfast dedication she had chosen to embody. Jinwoo followed silently, the weight of observation mixing with a growing admiration for the quiet moral strength he was witnessing, and awareness that in the unassuming attention and deliberate care of Mai, there existed a force that could shift perspectives, instill respect, and quietly influence the world around her without a single word being spoken. The soft light continued to dim, shadows stretching longer, and the atmosphere within the complex remained taut with anticipation, each small act performed by my resonating like a subtle echo of promise, commitment, and the enduring dignity of fulfilling a responsibility entrusted in quiet confidence. The hallway was quiet now, the fading sunlight casting long, soft streaks of orange and gold across the polished marble floors, mingling with the muted reflections of overhead lights. Mai moved with careful precision, her hands adjusting the placement of a set of teacups and documents on a low service table, each motion deliberate and measured, conveying a sense of calm authority that went unnoticed by the casual observers in the corridor. The distant hum of the city outside, the occasional whisper of a passing staff member, and the faint creak of the building settling created an ambient rhythm that blended seamlessly with the gentle sound of porcelain meeting wood. Her dark eyes were steady and focused, reflecting a depth of thought as she considered the steps she would need to take to honor the prisoner's whispered wish. Every gesture she made carried a quiet significance, a testament to her attention to detail and the silent commitment she had taken upon herself. Jinwoo Kim followed at a respectful distance, his tailored suit maintaining its sharp lines, his eyes observing the way Mai moved through the space with unspoken purpose, noting how her steady posture and deliberate actions conveyed a strength that was both quiet and commanding. The staff continued their routines around them, laughing softly, exchanging casual remarks, entirely unaware of the invisible thread of moral resolve connecting Mai to the prisoner's request. She paused briefly by a window, the golden light highlighting the contours of her face, and a subtle crease of concentration marked her features as she silently reaffirmed the promise she had made. Jinwoo's gaze lingered, a rare curiosity softening the usual reserve in his expression, as he considered the quiet power of influence that did not rely on words or visible authority, but on unwavering dedication and moral clarity. The corridor seemed to stretch further under the lengthening shadows, each reflective surface amplifying the subtle movements of Mai, framing her deliberate gestures in a way that emphasized their importance beyond the ordinary tasks they represented. As she continued, the echo of the prisoner's soft voice lingered in her mind, guiding her decisions and movements with an invisible hand, a constant reminder of the responsibility she carried in silence. Jinwoo felt a quiet respect growing within him, the kind that comes from witnessing commitment and integrity in action, and he sensed that the ordinary routines of the building were being reshaped, if only imperceptibly, by the steady cadence of her purposeful motion. Mai adjusted a small arrangement of documents, aligning them perfectly, her breath calm, her movements unhurried yet exact, each action a reflection of her resolve to honor what had been entrusted to her. The soft light continued to shift, shadows lengthening, painting the corridor with an ever-changing interplay of brightness and dark, echoing the layers of thought and intention behind her every gesture. The city beyond the windows continued its indifferent rhythm, but within these walls, the deliberate, quiet determination of Mai carried an unmistakable gravity, and Jinwoo recognized that influence, respect, and moral strength often resided in the small, consistent choices made in silence, shaping the perceptions and understanding of those who were perceptive enough to notice. Each careful motion, each attentive pause, reinforced the invisible bond of trust and responsibility she had assumed, and the corridor seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the fulfillment of the promise that was quietly, steadily taking shape under the unwavering focus of Mai. The evening shadows deepened as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, soft lines of golden and violet across the polished marble floors of Jinwoo Kim's office complex, and the ambient hum of the city outside mixed with the subtle creaks of the building to create a tranquil yet expectant atmosphere. Mai moved with careful deliberation, her dark eyes reflecting the fading light as she adjusted the placement of documents, teacups, and small decorative objects, each movement purposeful and precise, conveying a sense of calm command that drew attention without requiring it. She paused momentarily near a low console, her fingers tracing the edges of neatly stacked folders, her expression thoughtful as the prisoner's whispered wish replayed in her mind, shaping each decision she made and every subtle adjustment she performed. The quiet sounds of footsteps and muted chatter of staff continued around her, their casual presence contrasting sharply with the deliberate focus she brought to her work, yet unable to disturb the steady rhythm she maintained. Jinwoo followed silently, his tailored suit perfectly fitted, his gaze attentive, noting how every careful gesture and deliberate placement revealed a depth of responsibility and moral commitment that contrasted with the usual authority of his position. The corridor stretched before them, reflective surfaces catching the soft glow of fading sunlight and overhead lights, amplifying the subtle choreography of attention and care that Mai executed without hesitation. She adjusted a small teapot, aligning it perfectly with the accompanying cups, and as her hands hovered over a folder of papers, she exhaled slowly, centering herself before proceeding, each breath measured and deliberate. Jinwoo observed this, a rare sense of admiration settling into his expression, as he began to understand that influence and respect were often earned not by visible power, but by careful, steadfast attention to duty and the courage to act with integrity even when unnoticed. The quiet rhythm of her steps, the gentle clink of porcelain, and the soft sliding of papers across polished surfaces created an almost meditative pattern, each motion imbued with significance beyond the immediate, shaping the atmosphere in subtle but undeniable ways. I glanced briefly toward the distant visiting room, recalling the prisoner's soft voice and the promise she had committed to fulfilling, a reminder that every small action she performed carried weight in honoring that trust. Shadows lengthened further as night approached, framing her movements in a tableau of grace, attentiveness, and quiet determination, each gesture a testament to the power of focused intention and the respect it commands. Jinwoo's thoughts followed her silently, reflecting on the nature of responsibility, loyalty, and moral strength, recognizing that the quiet acts of integrity he observed in Mai were quietly reshaping his understanding of leadership and influence. The corridor, the reflections, and the dimming light seemed to participate in this unfolding story, amplifying the weight of every small, deliberate action and the invisible yet profound consequences of honoring a promise with courage, discretion, and unwavering dedication. In this serene yet charged environment, the presence of Mai, moving with quiet precision and moral purpose, set the stage for the unfolding fulfillment of the prisoner's final wish, a chain of careful actions and attention that would ripple outward with impact, shaping respect, trust, and the perception of integrity in ways that transcended the visible routines of the day. The night had settled fully over Seoul, and the city lights cast a soft, golden glow through the large windows of Jinwoo Kim's office complex, reflecting faintly on the polished marble floors and creating an interplay of shadows that seemed almost deliberate in their timing. Mai moved with unwavering focus, her dark eyes scanning the arrangement of documents and teacups, ensuring that every detail was perfectly aligned and accounted for, her movements precise and deliberate as though guided by a quiet internal rhythm. The faint hum of the city outside, combined with the occasional murmur of staff and the soft sliding of papers across polished surfaces, created an ambient soundscape that reinforced the sense of quiet purpose surrounding her actions. Each adjustment she made was small, yet meaningful, a reflection of the commitment she had taken to honor the prisoner's whispered wish, and the care with which she performed her duties added a weight to the ordinary routines of the evening. Jinwoo followed at a careful distance, his tailored suit immaculate, his gaze attentive and reflective as he observed the precision and patience in Mai's movements, noticing the subtle ways she asserted influence through calm, deliberate action rather than words or overt authority. The staff moved about, their voices light and casual, oblivious to the significance of the tasks being quietly orchestrated before them. Yet the room seemed charged with a subtle gravity that they could not perceive. Mai paused momentarily near a low table, her fingers lightly brushing the edges of a leather-bound folder as she considered her next steps, her expression thoughtful yet calm, reflecting the depth of focus and moral resolve she brought to her responsibilities. The prisoner's soft voice, still echoing in her mind, guided her with invisible force, shaping each decision and movement with the quiet insistence of trust and expectation. Jinwoo watched, sensing the strength and subtle authority in her dedication, realizing that the impact of a person's actions was not always visible, but often profound in the way it reshaped perception, respect, and the understanding of responsibility in others. The corridor extended before them, reflecting the soft glow of city lights and interior illumination, creating an almost cinematic stage where each gesture of Mai carried weight and significance, the careful placement of objects and measured movements a testament to the power of attention and integrity. Her eyes flickered toward the distant visiting room for a brief instant, acknowledging the memory of the prisoner's final wish, and she exhaled slowly, centering herself for the continuation of her task. The rhythm of her steps, the soft clink of porcelain, and the subtle movements of her hands combined to form a harmonious pattern, each act reinforcing her commitment to honor the trust placed in her. Jinwoo's perception of authority and influence shifted quietly, as he recognized that moral courage, integrity, and steadfast attention to detail could command respect more profoundly than overt displays of power. Shadows stretched and mingled with the reflected light, framing Mai's movements in a tableau of quiet determination and poised intention. And the energy of the evening seemed to hold in anticipation. Each deliberate act she performed echoing with the weight of promise, responsibility, and the enduring dignity of fulfilling a task entrusted in silence. The soft ambient hum of the building, combined with the meticulous care of her motions, created an atmosphere charged with subtle anticipation, marking the moment as the beginning of change, quietly reshaping the perception of respect, responsibility, and integrity in ways that could be felt even without being spoken. The night had deepened, settling over Seoul with a quiet intensity that filled the streets and alleys with muted light and the distant hum of activity from late-night traffic. Inside Jinwoo Kim's office complex, the soft glow from the overhead lamps and the reflections on the polished marble floors created an atmosphere of calm anticipation, as though the building itself recognized the significance of the evening. Mai moved deliberately through the corridors, her dark eyes attentive, scanning every surface and adjusting each item with careful precision. The slight clinking of porcelain and the soft sliding of papers forming a delicate rhythm that underscored the quiet determination in her actions. The prisoner's whispered wish resonated in her thoughts, guiding each motion and infusing her movements with purpose beyond the ordinary routines she had performed countless times before. Jinwoo followed at a measured distance, his tailored suit maintaining sharp lines, his gaze attentive and reflective as he noted the way Mai carried responsibility with such unwavering focus, her composure and attention conveying a quiet authority that was impossible to ignore. The staff continued their late-night routines, whispering softly and exchanging light remarks, oblivious to the invisible thread of dedication connecting Mai to the promise she had committed to fulfilling. Yet the air around her seemed charged with subtle gravity, the quiet energy of intention and moral responsibility radiating outward in ways that could be felt rather than seen. Mai paused near a window, the city lights casting gentle reflections across her face, highlighting the focus and resolve in her expression as she contemplated the steps necessary to honor the final wish entrusted to her care. Each movement, from adjusting a stack of documents to repositioning a small teapot, was deliberate, an embodiment of discipline, attentiveness, and a moral strength that defined her character. Jinwoo observed the subtle cues in her posture, the meticulous care of her hands, the fluidity of her movements, and he felt a growing sense of respect and recognition for the quiet power she wielded, the influence earned not through visibility or command, but through steadfast dedication, integrity, and attention to detail. The corridor stretched ahead, reflective surfaces catching the soft illumination from lamps and city light, amplifying the sense of careful choreography and quiet purpose that defined the moment. Maya's eyes briefly flickered to the distant visiting room, the echo of the prisoner's soft voice anchoring her focus, a reminder of the trust placed in her hands, and she exhaled with measured calm, resuming her task with renewed determination. The rhythm of her steps, the gentle clinks and slides of objects, and the deliberate cadence of her movements combined into a silent narrative, conveying moral resolve and quiet strength. Jinwoo's understanding of leadership and influence shifted subtly as he continued to watch, recognizing that courage and respect often manifested in the deliberate, thoughtful execution of responsibilities rather than in overt displays of power. The shadows lengthened, mingling with the soft reflections across the marble and polished surfaces, framing Maya's actions in a tableau of purpose and integrity, where every careful gesture carried meaning, and every decision made in silence reshaped the perception of trust, dedication, and moral clarity. In that stillness, with the soft ambient hum of the city below and the attentive movements of Maya above, a quiet transformation began to take shape, one that would influence the coming events and the understanding of responsibility and respect in ways that were profound, deliberate, and enduring. The night had fully embraced the city, leaving the streets bathed in a combination of muted neon and soft lamplight, the distant hum of activity outside blending with the subdued sounds of the building to create an atmosphere of quiet reflection. Inside Jinwoo Kim's office complex, Mai moved with an unwavering focus, her dark eyes attentive as she adjusted documents and teacups with deliberate care, each movement precise and purposeful, communicating a silent dedication that transcended the ordinary duties of her role. The faint clink of porcelain and the soft slide of papers across polished wood filled the air, establishing a rhythm that underscored the moral weight of the actions she had undertaken in service of the prisoner's whispered wish. Jinwoo observed from a short distance, his posture composed, yet his gaze revealed a growing awareness of the quiet authority and steadfast commitment that Mai displayed through her careful, measured motions. The staff moved about, their whispers and soft laughter bouncing lightly against the walls, completely unaware of the invisible threads of responsibility and trust that connected her to the promise she had chosen to uphold. Yet the subtle tension and focus emanating from Mai created a palpable energy that shaped the space around her. She paused briefly near a low table, fingers grazing the edge of a folder as her mind considered the sequence of steps necessary to honor the prisoner's final wish. A thoughtful crease appearing across her brow as she internally mapped the delicate balance between discretion, timing, and precision. The corridor stretched ahead, reflective surfaces amplifying the soft ambient light, framing her deliberate movements in a tableau that emphasized the significance of each action, each adjustment of a teacup, each careful repositioning of documents, spoke to a discipline and attention that quietly commanded respect and subtly reshaped the perception of her capabilities, even in the eyes of Jinwoo, who felt a sense of admiration stirring within him. The prisoner's soft, lingering words played through her mind, anchoring her focus and reinforcing the invisible yet profound weight of the responsibility she carried, guiding her decisions with an almost imperceptible influence that had begun to alter the trajectory of the evening. Shadows shifted with the movement of light, the interplay of darkness and glow highlighting the precision and grace of her actions, each gesture a testament to integrity, diligence, and moral resolve. Jinwoo's thoughts reflected on the power of subtle influence, the way quiet, deliberate acts of care could command respect, inspire trust, and affect change without the need for spoken acknowledgement or visible recognition. The soft rhythm of her steps, the measured handling of objects, and the careful execution of her responsibilities coalesced into a narrative of quiet justice, reinforcing the strength of character, attention to detail, and steadfast moral courage that she embodied. The ambient hum of the building, combined with the fading city sounds and the reflective surfaces surrounding her, created a setting that was charged with anticipation and significance, each small motion contributing to a larger, unspoken story of commitment, responsibility, and the enduring dignity of fulfilling a promise entrusted in silence. In this space, where the ordinary routines of evening work were elevated by careful, deliberate attention, I moved as both guardian and executor of the prisoner's final wish, her presence quietly commanding recognition and admiration, and Jinwoo's awareness deepened as he observed the unfolding demonstration of integrity and purpose, understanding that respect and influence could emerge most powerfully through silent, steadfast action. The soft glow of the city beyond the tall windows mingled with the interior light, creating a warm, muted ambience that seemed to slow time itself within the complex. I moved steadily through the corridors, her dark eyes focused and calm, every gesture deliberate as she aligned documents and teacups with care, the rhythm of her movements almost meditative. The faint hum of air circulation and the distant murmur of late-night city sounds provided a subtle soundtrack, reinforcing the quiet intensity of the evening. Each adjustment she made, whether smoothing the edge of a folder or positioning a cup with precise spacing, carried a significance that reached beyond the surface, reflecting the weight of responsibility she had assumed in honor of the prisoner's whispered wish. Jinwoo Kim followed, his presence measured and quiet, observing the grace and intentionality of her actions, noting the way each movement conveyed moral purpose and attention to detail. Staff members passed through the corridor, their voices soft and casual, unaware of the careful orchestration unfolding around them. Yet the atmosphere was charged with a quiet authority that emanated from Maya's steadfast focus. She paused for a brief moment near a large window, looking out at the city lights, and her expression was reflective, as if measuring the implications of her choices and the silent promise she carried. The corridor stretched ahead, its polished surfaces reflecting both light and movement, amplifying the significance of her purposeful steps and reinforcing the sense that each action contributed to a larger narrative of integrity and dedication. Jinwoo's perception of influence shifted as he continued to watch, recognizing that the quiet fulfillment of commitments could command respect and create impact without the need for overt acknowledgement or visible authority. Mai resumed her careful work, adjusting a small teapot and ensuring that the arrangement of papers and objects maintained balance and order, her movements precise yet effortless, revealing a mastery of attention and the subtle exercise of responsibility. The prisoner's words echoed softly in her mind, a reminder that the fulfillment of trust required patience, focus, and an unwavering dedication to moral clarity. Shadows lengthened and intertwined with the ambient light, highlighting the deliberate precision of her gestures and creating a tableau that underscored the depth of her commitment. Each sound, the gentle clink of porcelain, the sliding of papers, the soft tap of her shoes on polished marble, contributed to a rhythm that was both ordinary and profound, reflecting the quiet strength and attentiveness she embodied. Jinwoo's awareness deepened as he recognized the way her moral resolve shaped the environment around her, influencing perception and subtly commanding respect without a single word. The building seemed to hold its breath with her, reflecting back the careful, purposeful motion that marked her actions with gravity and intention. In this interplay of light, shadow, and sound, every measured step and careful adjustment resonated with significance, reinforcing the invisible yet undeniable presence of integrity, dedication, and the fulfillment of a responsibility carried with quiet dignity. The soft hum of the night and the meticulous care in her movements combined to create an atmosphere rich with anticipation and meaning, setting the stage for the culmination of the trust she had embraced and the transformation that was quietly unfolding within the space. The night had settled fully, and the soft glow of city lights filtered through the tall windows, painting the polished marble floors in muted shades of gold and violet. Mai moved with deliberate precision, her dark eyes reflecting the ambient light as she completed the final adjustments to documents, teacups, and small decorative objects, each placement exact and purposeful, imbued with the quiet weight of the promise she had carried throughout the evening. The faint hum of the building and the distant sounds of late-night traffic outside provided a subtle backdrop, reinforcing the calm intensity of her movements. She paused for a brief moment near the low service table, her fingers tracing the edges of a folder before arranging it precisely with the others, the prisoner's whispered words resonating in her mind, guiding every decision with quiet determination and moral clarity. Jinwoo Kim watched silently, his posture composed, yet his eyes revealed a deep awareness and an emerging respect for the integrity and attention to detail that Ma exhibited in every careful motion. The staff moved about, whispering softly and exchanging casual remarks, entirely unaware of the delicate orchestration unfolding within the corridor, yet the air around me seemed charged with an understated authority, a subtle power born of focused purpose and unwavering dedication. Shadows lengthened across the polished floors, intertwining with reflections of the city lights, framing her actions in a tableau of deliberate intent and quiet strength. Each precise adjustment, each careful placement of a teacup or document, carried significance that reached beyond the surface, reflecting the responsibility she had assumed and the trust placed in her hands. Jinwoo's thoughts lingered on the observation of her steady, composed movements, recognizing the profound influence of quiet courage, meticulous attention, and moral resolve, and realizing that the impact of such actions extended far beyond what was immediately visible. Maya's eyes flickered briefly toward the distant visiting room, the memory of the prisoner's soft voice anchoring her focus, and she exhaled slowly, centering herself to complete the final stages of her task with poise and unwavering resolve. The corridor stretched on, reflective surfaces capturing the movement of her hands, the gentle rhythm of her steps, and the soft ambient illumination, amplifying the significance of her careful actions in a space that had now become charged with anticipation and moral clarity. Each small sound, the clink of porcelain, the sliding of papers, the quiet tap of her shoes against marble, contributed to a subtle yet profound narrative, reinforcing her integrity and the dedication to honor a promise without expectation of acknowledgement. Jinwoo continued to watch, silently acknowledging the quiet mastery of focus, discipline, and ethical courage in Mai, realizing that respect and influence often emerge most powerfully through deliberate, thoughtful action rather than through over-assertion. As she straightened the final items and took a step back, a sense of completion filled the room, the soft glow of lights reflecting on her poised form, capturing the quiet dignity and steadfast commitment that defined her presence. The air seemed to settle around her, the energy of attentive care, moral courage, and faithful execution of a promise resonating in every shadow and reflection, marking the culmination of her work and leaving an enduring impression on Jinwoo. In the stillness, with the city lights casting long reflections and shadows around them, both observed and observer shared an unspoken recognition that the quiet fulfillment of responsibility, performed with integrity and unwavering attention, had transformed the ordinary into a moment of lasting significance. And that evening, the world remembered what dignity looks like.